What's up, folks? I walked out on the dock today and I saw one of my favorite signs that I love to see this time of year because it means the bass bite is gonna go crazy. I don't know if you can see it with this, but we have got sunfish on the beds, and when the sunfish are on the beds, it is go time for bass fishing. So we're gonna talk about fishing bluegill beds today. We've got a bunch of underwater footage. We're gonna put this down on the nest, check out what those sunnies are doing. Let's go, it's gonna be a good one. Fishing for sunfish is fun and amazing, and you can fill up the pans and eat good, but you can also catch a ton of bass while you're doing this. So when I am targeting bass around sunfish beds, I like to throw jigs, I like to throw poppers, I like to throw anything that gives the profile look, that craw, that hover rig of a bluegill, right? All the baits today are featured on vantagetackle.com. Check them out, go there, support us, support them. Let me know in the comment section what you want to see in the future.
All right, guys, so let's get down to business. When the sunfish come into spawn, it's following the bass spawn. You can pick up some of the biggest bass post spawn that you're going to catch around sunfish beds. Now, when sunfish come in, they like to find gravelly type areas to spawn that are generally free of a lot of aquatic vegetation, and that's because they're going to fan out and make these moon crater style beds everywhere. And we could be talking about 5 to 10 fish in an area, we could be talking about 100 or more, but generally speaking they're going to be areas that are ringed by vegetation, and that's going to be key for the pattern that we're fishing here. Now, you're going to be looking for 1 to 2 fish around a bluegill bed. Not 100, they're not out chasing shad. These are generally bigger fish, bigger females especially, that are sitting there because there is a free meal or dinner plate right there in the shallows. Why would they go deep and chase when they can basically pick out which bluegill that they want to eat? They're going to sit on the outside edges of bluegill beds and basically wait for bluegills to make mistakes, get too far away from the beds, get too far away from everybody else, then they're going to pounce. And there's kind of a two-pronged approach that I like to fish bluegill beds. One is literally a jig on the bottom, and you can pick any jig that you want to. I like the ebb and flow upgrade here. It's got a Bait Cave Customs Cave Cricket on it, and I'm just going to simply hop this jig through bluegill beds, and when I run into the edge of a bluegill bed, I'm really going to make aggressive loud hops because it looks like something fleeing from either the bluegill or the bass, if in the right situations, can think it's a bluegill themselves. The other thing I'm going to use is a VMC Tokyo rig. Here's a Cave Cricket from Bait Cave Customs once again, and I like these two baits because they make clicking sounds on the bottom. If you are around sunfish beds, you're going to hear a lot of popping and clicking as those fish kind of move those pebbles around and run into stuff, root around in those areas. So that weight making contact with the bottom, or that jig head making contact with the bottom, is really going to give you a great presentation. Plus, crawfish around rocks, not a bad option, but this is a great presentation to really pick apart bluegill beds. Now, this comes down to cruising around flats, finding those bluegill beds and making different casts and different angles across those beds. Another great way to do this is to fish just the naked craw on a jig head. Here's the ebb and flow jig head with that 4-inch Bait Cave Customs Cave Craw on it. I really like this color scheme, that green and yellow this time of year. But as we go across different bluegill beds in different areas, you can see consistency on the bottom is key. These areas, and they have rocks in the middle, they have shells in the middle, any kind of hard substrate where that bluegill is going to spawn. With that jig head on the bottom with that craw style presentation, you're making a loud clicking noise and you're giving those bass something to key in on. And you're coming through that submerged vegetation in different ways. Now, when we get into areas with heavy vegetation, this is where I like to stroke a jig. So as you can see here, we're popping that jig up and we're letting it fall into the potholes. We're swimming it above all of these different areas, and then we're letting it fall into those areas, because what happens is, as bass see these baits popping up out of those areas where bluegill are, they're just programmed to nail those baits as they come out. This is one of my favorite times to pitch a puffball jig, because it gives a nice slow fall to that jig and really makes bass think about, you know, this is a big meal. I really want to eat something. So when this puffball jig here with that cave craw on it pops out of those holes and darts around but slow falls back down into them, it really looks like a sunfish or a crawfish is popping out of that hole, and those bass are gonna absolutely nail it. The jig bite is phenomenal this time of year, but once again, let me stress that you're gonna catch one, maybe two bigger bass around bluegill beds. They're an awkward prey to eat for bass. They're spiny, they're big, they're oblong, if you will. So the bass you're going to catch around sunfish beds are going to be better than average. Better than average fish eat jigs. And the better, more realistic your jig looks, or the slower it's presented, most oftentimes is better. And as you can see, we found more bluegill beds here interspersed with these weeds, so a jig becomes a really good thing to throw around bluegill beds simply for its weedless variety in nature and the fact that it's a big, bulky presentation, the same thing as a bluegill. So another way to change it up, and this is kind of the second part of my presentation, is quick moving baits, or baits that are hovering, falling, giving you a different look. So here is that Bait Cave Customs Craw on a ebb and flow upgrade hover style hook, and what I'm doing is I'm twitching this and ripping it out of vegetation. I'm literally looking for a reaction bite. It's almost like fishing a fluke, except you're fishing a bigger profile craw bait on there to give it more extended actions. Then I let it fall in the potholes, let it go down to the bottom. Really what I'm doing is I'm milking the area for all of its worth. I'm making 7 to 8 casts per bluegill bed, per spawning area, to really see what is there. One of my favorite all-time baits doing this also is the Megabass Dark Sleeper Gill, and this is a a ½ ounce, 3/4 ounce bait that is really heavy, but twitching it through vegetation and letting it fall in potholes is a great way to fish around bluegill beds. And you really get a factor of realism here with this bait. It's one of those things that I love to do. It's one of these patterns that I don't see a lot of guys fishing. A lot of guys go to the shad deep, they go out to the top water, but they neglect to really focus in on that bluegill bite, and you can generate a nice tournament pattern just simply off of fishing bluegill beds. And the more beds that you can find and mark, that gives you more option. You could spend an entire 8 hours out on the water hitting different bluegill beds with 4 or 5 different baits and put together a really nice limit. But knowing the bottom composition is key, and knowing the rock is key. Here's that Savage Gear Structure Gill. That's one of my big players from last year. This bait is torn up and chunked up from catching so many bass, but once again, it's a great bluegill imitator. It allows you to really mimic the forage that the bass are keyed in on, and once those bass are eating those gills, they really enjoy eating that bluegill profile, that bluegill bulk, if you will, so you can catch a better than average fish doing this pattern.
Pick up some of those bluegill style swim baits, those Megabass Dark Sleeper and Dark Sleeper Gill. Those are killer. The Savage Gear Structure Gill, it's a killer. The Ebb and Flow Jig, the Bait Cave Custom Lures, pick those up, give them a throw. You're not going to be disappointed. We'll see you guys next time.